everybody. I want to share a little bit of my story with you. I'm one of those people, those starving people that Alan just talked about. I grew up in a Christian home, or I should say maybe a church-going home. And ever since I was a little child, I wanted to be loved like I think everybody else here. And at that early age, I understood that love was something to be deserved. I had to earn it. Like most of us, we often grow up in homes where we talk about love, but you are loved when you do certain things and when you don't do other things, okay? So I was very good at understanding that if I wanted to be loved and accepted, I would have to be a good boy. And I really tried very hard at being and becoming a good boy. And I think I was very successful at that. I especially wanted to be accepted by my father. You see, I grew up in a very dysfunctional home. My father was an alcoholic. My mother was trying to do both jobs as a mother and as a working mother, trying to make ends meet because my father was always out of jobs. And my father was a very introverted man who kept to himself. And I think he understood that his role as a man, as a father, was just to bring money home. When he couldn't do that, he just withdrew into his world. And my mother just worked harder and harder, and I wanted to be loved and loved. I also was an accident, sort of, because my parents were not planning to have a baby when I was born, you know. You see, they were taking precautions, but the precaution didn't work. So here I am, you know. I understood that from my family, and then I transferred that to God. And as an illustration, when I was a little kid, I lived in a very small town, and we went to a Baptist church, a very tiny little church. And at that time, it was a frontier town, and electricity had not yet reached that place. And I was sitting right at the front bench, because it wasn't even a pew, it was just a wood bench. And there was a preacher preaching, and there was a kerosene lamp right in front of him. One of those old traditional ones, you know, and I've always loved fire. You know, even today I love to play with fire. And you see, he was preaching that long sermon. He didn't have anybody pointing you how much time you have, like here, you know. So I was mesmerized, not by the message, but by the flame of the kerosene lamp. And of course, children have to touch everything. And so, sure enough, I went with my little finger and I touched the glass of that part of the kerosene lamp, you know, where the flame is. And as you know, it's very, very hot. And when I touched it, it sizzled. And the preacher, who was obviously watching me, he seized the opportunity and he said, "And that's how hell is going to be like. But not just the tip of your finger, your whole body for all eternity." Yeah, I said, "Oh my, I don't want that, you know. What do I have to do not to go to hell? You gotta be good." And so I tried very hard to be as good as I could. You know, and I was very successful, as I said before. I became involved in everything I could in my church, and eventually, to make a very long story short, I was youth group leader. I organized Christian camps, and even in my church, they said, "One day you should go to the seminary because you're going to be a very good pastor. You're such a good person." I also felt along that time, in my early teen years, that there was something wrong with me, but I did not know exactly what it was. I noticed that my friends, you know, the other boys, you know, at my age level, they were already talking about girls, and I wasn't interested in girls at all. On the contrary, I started to notice that some guys, I looked at them and said, "Oh," you know, and I did not know what it was, but something inside of me said, "Hey, there's something wrong." Now, you see, we did not talk about sexuality. And of course, no one talked about homosexuality, even less. When I was, going back a little bit, when I was about 5 or 6, I was molested sexually by a neighbor, by a woman who was one of our neighbors. And that helped to contribute to my difficulties with the opposite sex. I was also abused emotionally by strong women as I was growing up. So I started to become afraid of women first. Eventually, I started to feel angry at women. And at the same time, I started having these feelings towards men. And I had no idea what they were, and I couldn't talk to anybody about it. Sometimes I would hear things in the church like some sins are worse than other sins. And little by little, I understood that that was the sin. So what I did is I promised myself that I wouldn't do that. Because, to me, the idea of having a fellowship with God was up there up the stairs, and I had to climb the stairs to get to God, So I was working my way up those stairs. Eventually, I did go to the seminary when I was 18, and I learned about a missionary organization and called OM, Operation Mobilization. And I joined them for a month. I ended up staying for 2.5 years. And during that time, the feelings that until then I was stuffing down, trying to hide from myself, really started to come to the surface. And it was horrible because I couldn't talk to anybody about them. I remember one time we were in Colombia, and I was interpreting for a preacher, an evangelist, and in Colombia, downtown, I think. And during the altar call, 3 young men came towards us, and I was supposed to be counseling the people who were coming forward. And they came to me and they said, "We are homosexuals. Can God change us?" And I started, yes, of course, there's nothing impossible for God. But in my heart, I was falling apart because I was struggling and I did not know what to do. To make another long story short, eventually I came to my leader, one of my leaders on the ship. I was on the ship, one of the ships, Doulos. And I said to him, I don't want to be doing what I'm doing anymore because I was traveling a lot by myself. And I was afraid that I was going to have a fall, that I was going to get involved. You see, until that time, I had never had any sexual involvement with anybody in my whole life. And I noticed that it was becoming more and more dangerous. And I did not want to tell him what I was struggling with because I was afraid. But he pressed me a little bit, and eventually I said, yes, I'm afraid that I'm going to have a sexual fall. What do you mean? Well, I've discovered that I am attracted to other guys, and I'm afraid that I'll have a sexual fall. Now, he stared at me, and he stopped talking to me, and he said, eventually he said, you'd better pack your things and go home. That was the first of 4 times in my life when I was kicked out of some kind of Christian organization because of my struggle with homosexuality. You see, this was many years ago, and back then they did not know how to handle this, and it hasn't changed very much. I was very disappointed, went back home, but still tried very hard to be good and earn God's favor. I ended up going to a missionary conference in São Paulo, a missionary conference, much like this, not as many people, of course. And in that conference, I met a guy who was also a seminary student, and I had my first sexual involvement with that man in a missionary conference. I tell you this because sometimes we think, oh, we don't want our young children to, get lost out there in the world. You don't have to go very far, to find partners for a lot of things. I was devastated because I thought, okay, I committed a sin for which there is no forgiveness. And then, of course, I promised God that I would never do it again. And I intended not to. However, that had been the first time that I had another man hugging me, embracing me, and saying, I love you. You see, I was emotionally starving, and I wanted that love from another man. I did not understand at that time the dynamics behind it all, but that hug and that tenderness brought me back, and eventually I went to a gay bar. And I remember when I walked in that gay bar for the first time, I said to myself, this is heaven, and I found it. And you know why? Because there I could take off my mask and be honest about what I felt. The tragedy is that the place where we should be able, or we could or should be able to take off our masks is the church. And I found that in a gay bar, as Alan sort of said, And at first I was very excited about that because I felt God is too hard to please. I can't please him. So I walked away. All my love, all my devotion for God just vanished. And I thought, well, I tried very hard. I was a missionary. I was in seminary. I dropped out of seminary. And I said to myself, it's impossible to please God. He must have made me this way. He probably created me for condemnation. And there's nothing I can do about it, but I have to be true to myself. I started, living in the gay lifestyle at first as best as I could, and eventually you start learning. You pick up you start enjoying certain things. And I thought, God doesn't want anything to do with me. And little by little, I met people. I got everything I wanted. Some years passed by. I tried several times to go back to churches. Every time my background came up, I was kicked out again, or I walked away in shame until I gave up totally and felt there is no hope for me. I was born gay, this is what I am, and when I die, I'm going to go to hell, so let me enjoy it while I'm here. I thought that God had given up on me, so I had given up on God. But to my surprise, when I gave up trying to please God, I started hearing God speaking to me. Now, you see, I grew up a Presbyterian. In Brazil, we joke saying that when a Presbyterian listens to God's voice, he has to go to a psychiatrist. You see, I wasn't a Pentecostal. I was this traditional Presbyterian. But God came to me and said, Willie, I love you. And I would look around and say, who's there? After many times that happened, that thing happening, I started to discern, yeah, this is God speaking to me. What is he trying to say? It doesn't make sense to me. How can God love me being gay? It's impossible. God doesn't love gays. He hates them. He sends them to hell. And that happened several times. One day I was washing my car outside, and again that voice came and said, I love you and I have so much to give you. I got so mad. I had a bucket of water in my hands. I threw it down. I went inside the house. There was nobody there that day. And I started screaming at God. And I said, God, don't you have anything else to do? I'm busy washing my car and you come with, I love you, I love you, I love you. I can't do this, I can't be straight. I can't change, and I'm not going to change. And you know what? I don't want to change. It's impossible to please you. I tried everything and blah, 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 and I went on for a long time. And then I waited for the lightning to come down and strike me, or for the earth to crack open so that I would go straight to hell. That didn't happen. Instead, a voice said, are you finished? I said, yeah, waiting. What do you think you have that I don't have? What is it that you think you can do that I cannot do better than you can? Do you think I need your money? Do you think I need your time? Do you think I need your worship, your praise? I'm God. I don't need anything. And I said, what? I've always heard people telling me that I should do this and that to please you, to climb the stairs. And he said, why didn't you ever ask me what I wanted from you? And I had never done that, and said, okay, what do you want? Still aggressively. And he said, I want your heart. I said, oh, my heart? Oh, what are you going to do with it? Throw it into hell? Because it's full of dirt. I didn't use the word dirt. I used another word. Anyway, he said, no, I'm not going to do that. What do you want to do with my heart? I want to pour my life into your heart. And I said, why? Because that's what I made you for. And in that moment, something inside of me said, that's it. That's what I have been looking for. Something inside of me said that. But I said, hey, wait a minute. I'm not going to change. I'm not going to give up my boyfriend. I'm not going to go to church. I'm not going to read the Bible. I don't like Christians. I hate them. They're terrible. Willie, you don't understand. I'm not asking for anything in return. Will you accept my love? Is that all you want? Yes, that's all I want. I want to give you my love. Will you take it? I said, are you sure you're not going to ask me anything in return? He said, no, that's all I want. I said, okay, if you want to love me, here I am. Love me. And that was about 14 years ago. The love of God came. It came, and it didn't stop. It hasn't stopped ever since. God never asked me for my boyfriend, or never asked me to go to a church. He never asked me to leave my gay friends or anything like that. The minute God's love started pouring into my heart, I noticed, I knew immediately, this is what I have been looking for so far and haven't found. Whether it was in religion, whether it was in being good, or whether it was in being as bad as I could, I wasn't finding it. And now, here's this love finding me. That was the beginning of a transformation process. that eventually I realized, hey, I am a beloved son. The words of God to his son Jesus, you are my beloved son in whom I have great delight. That's exactly the same words I heard that day. And that's the words I hear every single day when I wake up. I am a beloved son of God. I'm not ex-gay. I'm not becoming heterosexual. I am a beloved son of God. And I'm growing and learning day by day to be more and more like Jesus. At first I thought, hey, this is too good to be true. After a while, hey, this is so good and it is true. And then now, this is so good and it is true. And the world needs to know. And this is why we are here. This is why EGA exists in Exodus all over the globe. And this is why we are here, to proclaim the truth, that there is no sin that God cannot forgive. There is no chain, no bondage that he cannot break. Amen.